Fauvism was the first of the avant-garde movements that flourished in France in the early years of the 20th century. The Fauve painters were the first to break with Impressionism. Their spontaneity was expressed in bold, undisguised brushstrokes and vibrant colors directly from the tube. Henri Matisse and André Derain introduced unnaturalistic color and vivid brushstrokes into their paintings in the summer of 1905, while working together in a small fishing port of Collier on the Mediterranean coast. When their pictures were exhibited later that year, they inspired the critic to call them fauves, or wild beasts, in his review. This term was later applied to the artists themselves and began the Fauvism movement. The Fauves were a loosely shaped group of artists sharing a similar approach to nature, but they had no definitive program. Their leader was Matisse, who had arrived at the Fauve style after earlier experimenting with the sources of Fauvism, which included the work of Gustave Moreau, Van Gogh, and Gauguin, as well as Neo-Impressionism, all of which opened the way to a form of painting freed from the pictorial conventions accepted since the Renaissance. These influences inspired him to reject traditional three-dimensional space and seek instead a new picture space defined by the movement of color planes. Matisse was born in his grandparents' home and grew up in the neighboring village of Bohan and Vermondos, where his father's general store had developed into a grain business. He worked first as a solicitor's clerk in the local town of Saint Quentin before taking a degree in law in Paris from October 1887 to August 1889. Without apparently showing the slightest bit of interest in art whatsoever. On returning home, he resumed work as a solicitor's clerk. Being bored by the routine of his office life, he attended drawing classes at the École Quentin Latour before going to work every morning. In winter of 1889, Matisse took up painting during a long period of recovering from an appendicitis. He abandoned law and obtained his father's permission begrudgingly to study painting in Paris. He registered at the Académie Julian in October of 1891. After failing his examination in October of 1892, he decided to take courses in drawing and perspective with the hopes of learning more. In 1892, Matisse was invited to join the studio of Gustave Moreau, who had been appointed professor in January of that year. He passed the official entrance examination in 1895 and remained in Moreau's studio until his marriage in January of 1898. When taking a look at the following three paintings by Matisse, you can clearly see how they would be considered a part of Fauvism, due to the amazing colors he used throughout the pieces. He also used simplified forms which defied the norms back then. He developed his paintings by using ordinary subject matter within them. Most importantly, they were extremely expressive. Matisse influenced other artists by pushing every boundary possible within his art. He opened the door for others to follow his lead and be different, be expressive in new ways, and not to let anybody else tell them, no, you can't do it that way.